Hey y'all, welcome back to Katy's Reading Room. Thank you so much for your continued support of my love for Alas Babylon. I have truly enjoyed engaging with you all on this amazing book. And I'm excited to get started on a chapter 2 summary for you. Just a reminder that the best way that you can support this channel and all future creation of Babylon related content is to like and subscribe. Okay, chapter 2. So we ended chapter 1 with the information in the telegram, the warning of Alas Babylon, and the news that Helen and the kids would be flying into Orlando that night. Randy leaves his house to meet his brother Mark at McCoy Air Force Base. A little fun fact, this Air Force Base was actually closed in the 1970s, and the land is now occupied by the Orlando Airport. The code for this airport is MCO, which is a reference to the namesake of the former Air Force Base, Michael McCoy. So if you've ever flown into Orlando Airport, you've been to this place in the book. Okay, back to Randy. Randy is getting in his car and sees Missouri, remember Mizzou, getting in her car headed for her next job at the McGoverns. Missouri is driving a certified antique Model A, and Randy is driving a brand new Bonneville. I'll leave it to you to Google images of those two cars. They're going to be super important later in the story, so store them away, remember them, and maybe think a little bit on just how different those two cars would be. So it's 11 a.m. Randy is now driving to Orlando and listening to the news on the radio. This was back in the day where, there's no phones, everything's live, so he's tuning into live radio to figure out what's going on in the world. And it's filled with news on political tensions involving Israel, Russia, Egypt, Syria, and others. And sounds a little familiar, doesn't it? Russia warns American allies that if the U.S. strikes against Syria, any nations harboring American bases will be, and I quote, erased from the earth. Let that marinate for just a second. Think about how many different countries we have military bases in and what that would actually look like. Randy thinks that this all does sound bad, but it doesn't sound unfamiliar, and guesses that Mark must have some news or inside intel because otherwise he wouldn't be sounding the alarm. We're going to switch characters now and come back to our girl Florence. Florence is meeting her friend Alice Cooksey, and Alice is awesome. She is one of my favorite characters in the entire book. I know I say that about a lot of the characters, but they're all just so well written. Alice really is fantastic. She's described as an angry sparrow of a woman, but just to clarify, I think she's just really passionate. She's late to lunch, and she blames her tardiness on a squabble with Kitty Offenhouse, which alarms Florence because Kitty is married to Bubba Offenhouse, and Florence thinks that Bubba is a powerful man in the county. He is on a lot of boards and clubs and owns a really prosperous business, the cemetery. This apparently is not Alice's first fight with Kitty. This time, though, it happens to be about books. Alice is the librarian at the public library. Kitty comes into the library all heated and said that she heard rumors that the library held books written by two civil rights activists. Alice responds that the rumors are true and asks Kitty if she'd like to check one out, which I find to be hilarious. Kitty is mad because she's against the civil rights movement. This is an underlying theme alert. We talked about this in chapter 1, that it's not just an in-your-face, like, here's the meaning of the book, but it's definitely there, and here's another example of it. So Kitty says she's going to take the issue up with Porky Logan. Remember him from earlier. He's the man that Randy lost his political race to. Florence is alarmed by this, and she thinks that Alice might lose her job because she's kind of picking a fight with the wrong people. Alice disagrees. She says that she threatened Kitty back and said that if she tried to get rid of the books, Alice would call up all the news agencies, which would get her to stop because bad publicity would hurt Bubba's business. 2/3 of his customers are African Americans and Northerners. Alice then asks Florence how her day is going, and Florence tells her that she thinks Randy was watching her earlier in the morning, and Alice basically tells her, like, you wish. Florence then tells Alice about the telegram that Randy received from Mark because she thinks the Alas Babylon ending was really weird and finds it odd that Helen and the kids would be flying down before the school semester is finished. Alice defends the Braggs, and she mentions that Randy read every history in the library before he was even 16. Florence tells Alice to come out to her house for the night as they both have to work in town the next day and they can ride together. And Alice is kind of like, well, I'll think about it. So Alice returns to the library after her lunch and she is on a mission. She immediately goes and gets out the King James Bible, flips to the book of Revelation, knows exactly what verse she's looking for, and it is as follows. And the kings of the earth who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her shall bewail her and lament for her when they shall see the smoke of her burning, standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. Alice immediately understands the situation, and she knows exactly what Mark is referencing in his telegram to Randy. She decides that she will, in fact, go out to Florence's house this evening, so that if the end is near, she won't be alone. This is one of the reasons that I love Alice so much. She is able to read between the lines, to read the room, to know what's happening, and she's just so quick about it. Okay, we're switching back to Randy now, who is arriving at McCoy Air Force Base. As Randy drives through the base, he realizes that there are alarmingly fewer people on base than normal. He noted that there were no civilians or women. He also notices that there are a lot less planes, and notes that if they were out on foreign duty, his acquaintance, Paul Hart, would also be gone, but Paul is on base this day and is meeting Randy. Randy asks Paul why it feels so deserted, and Paul tells Randy that where they are standing is a primary target. Therefore, they keep half the wing off base and 10% airborne at all times, and 4 B-47s on standby, bombed up and ready to go. Randy responds that he wasn't talking about the planes, but was wondering where all the people were. If you've ever been to a busy military base, and I live in Oklahoma City, which is home to Tinker Air Force Base, you know that they are packed with people all the time. They're super busy. Except on this day, McCoy is kind of a ghost town, and it kind of has Randy's radar going off. So Paul gets kind of uncomfortable with his response, decides to tell Randy anyways that they've kind of been on this like creeping evacuation for a little over a month. They've cleared the area of all civilians and non-essential personnel, and they're encouraging military personnel to move their families to a safer place. He then says that they really can't count on a 3 to 6 hour window of warning anymore, and that if they are lucky, they might get 15 minutes. And I want you to just think about that. 15 minutes to prepare an entire Air Force base, to get planes off the ground, to evacuate, to basically be ready for World War III and the end of the world is not very long at all. So Randy looks at the 4 standby B-47s that are bombed up, and he notices the missiles that are slung under the wings. And he asks if those red babies are any help. What those red babies are is called the Rascal, which was an air-to-ground H-bomb or hydrogen bomb carrier. Paul responds that that red baby is also known as the Crew Saver. It's a missile that allows the pilot to not have to get too close to the target. Paul gets a little emotional and says that he is actually safer if he is in the sky in his aircraft than if he is at home with his wife and kids who live just 5 miles from base. At this point, Mark's plane arrives, and we learn that Randy and Mark look a lot alike. Mark is the older brother, and he shows a little bit more signs of aging and maybe not as cushy of a life as his younger brother Randy lives. Mark and Randy get into Randy's car so they can go talk in private. Randy starts by asking what time Helen and the kids will arrive, to which he is told that it will be in the middle of the night. Mark says that Helen knows what's going on and will know what to do. He then gets down to business. Mark says that the key is in the Med, meaning the Mediterranean Sea is vitally important. Control of the Med means control of the world. Mark tells Randy that he's sure of everything because they have the enemy's war plan. Mark outlines all the places the Soviets have their submarines in place. The most important piece of this conversation is where Mark tells Randy that if the U.S. makes any kind of military countermove, the enemy will strike. He has this info from a former Russian general, so we know that it's legit. And let me break down what that means with any military countermove. So if the enemy is provoking U.S. military members. That could be any kind of military aircraft, any kind of military ship, whatever it is. If they provoke that unit to the point that the American military personnel retaliates, that's it. It's game over. They're launching all the nukes. So Mark gets into the next piece of the information, and that's the tactical part. According to Mark, the enemy will launch everything so that it all nukes. According to Mark, the enemy will launch all of their weapons, all of their missiles, so that all the nukes hit their targets at the same time, instead of launching them at the same time, which would make the impact times vary because they're going to travel different distances. Mark says it doesn't really matter if the enemy can pull it off. If they think they can and are willing to take that bet, then everyone has already lost. It's called mutually assured destruction, meaning if one side fires, the other side is also going to fire, and you can assure that both sides will be mutually destroyed. Mark explains that he thinks that it really has been over for a while because the most recent Sputniks, the Russian satellites, have been reconnaissance satellites, mapping out their targets. Mark has 2 reasons for thinking it's about to go down. 1, there are 3 unidentified submarines, or skunks, in the Caribbean and 1 in the Gulf. He says that 4 subs may not sound like a lot, but there shouldn't be any. He estimates between 600 and 700 enemy subs, and the big kicker here is that they don't need to surface to launch the nukes. They can stay underwater and use the ocean as a perfectly good launching pad. The second reason is that he is already en route back to Offutt, back in Nebraska. They had only arrived in Puerto Rico the day before, and the job they were doing there was a pretty important one that should have taken longer, but they were told to come back to SAC headquarters immediately. 2/3 of the wing on Ramey in Puerto Rico was also scrambled with flyaway kits. So Mark gives Randy a check for $5,000 with strict instructions to cash it today. There's an importance here that we need to talk about. He says do not deposit it, cash it. And I want you to think about that. If Randy takes this money to the bank and he deposits it, it's good in his account and he can spend his account however he wants to. But if banking systems go down, if he's not able to write a check, if he's not able to operate a cash register at a store, then that money in the account is totally useless. But if he has hard cash in his hand, he can probably lay in the supplies that he needs. So those are Mark's instructions on that money. Mark tells Randy that he can give the McGoverns a heads up. Remember, that's Lib McGovern, Lavinia McGovern, Bill McGovern. Lib is basically Randy's girlfriend. And then it's time for him to load up. So this meeting between the brothers really didn't last very long. His parting words to Randy are about his wife, Helen. He talks about his great love for Helen and how she truly believed in his ability to become a general. He tells Randy to let Helen give him the same loyalty that she gave him. And he doesn't mean romantically here. He's not saying like, hey, brother, I hope that you hook up with my wife. What he's saying is that his wife is incredibly loyal, she is incredibly supportive, and she is very tough. And he says, if it comes down to it, allow her to be that support system for you. Allow her to help guide you through this. So Mark then loads the plane back for Nebraska, and the brothers say goodbye for what could be the last time. They don't know. Randy keeps it together until he is well away from base, where he pulls over and he takes a moment. He lays his head on his steering wheel and he cries. We don't know how long he does this for, but he realizes that he has wasted his time on tears and needs to get back to the bank before it closes. Remember, he was not in Fort Repose, he was off at Orlando. So he vows to never waste time again on tears. And I think that that's kind of like a big statement. When you think that you could be staring into nuclear winter, telling your brother goodbye, expecting your sister-in-law and your niece and nephew to come stay with you, but you tell yourself no matter how bad it gets, you will never again waste time on tears. Like that's a pretty stark thing to do. So that ends chapter 2. So we've got some really great exposition laid. We have layers of conflict. We've got some developing themes. We've got all these great characters that we're meeting. We're really starting to see the town of Fort Repose set up as kind of a character within itself. chapter 3 is really interesting. It's going to open with a character that is maybe going to make you mad, but I want you to just hang with it. And I thank you guys so much for enjoying Alas Babylon and staying on this journey with me and allowing me the space and time to just talk about this great book. It kind of makes me feel like I'm back in the classroom again, which is a unit that I greatly miss teaching every year. So thanks for giving me this opportunity. Again, the best way that you can continue to support my channel is to like and subscribe. Please engage in the comments. Let's keep the conversation going, and I will see you guys for chapter 3. Bye, y'all.